Hello, and welcome to a special edition of Up Close on METV. I'm Charles Clapsaddle, Station Manager for Manatee Educational Television, and it is our privilege to have with us today Mr. Herb Hiller. Herb, thank you so much for joining us.
Charles, thank you.
For those of you who don't know, Mr. Hiller is not only the Florida Trail Advocate of the Year from 2010 through 2012, but he's also an instrumental member of the East Coast Greenway Alliance and a great force in sustaining an authentic and sustainable Florida. And that's our mission today, to talk about the upcoming conference, which Mr. Hiller is instrumental in putting together. But before we begin, sir, for those who don't know you, can you tell us a little bit about your background? Because you've been very involved in Florida and Greenway things for many, many years. And tell our audience a little bit about your background.
Thank you, Charles. Happy to do so. I've long been involved in bicycling and trails and in ecotourism. I found my way into bicycling about 1975 or so when I decided to give up my car and lose a lot of weight, which I did. I was very successful at that, thank you. And my curiosity about bicycling led me in a direction wherein I resumed the state of Florida bicycling program after a 50-year hiatus. We had been prominent in bicycling into the mid to late 20s, then it died, and in '77 we revived it. So I have a certain credential for that, and that led me into trails. I had worked, my day job was in tourism, and I worked as a vice president for Norwegian Caribbean Lines, which revived the cruise industry in Florida. And I was always interested in the receiving end. What impact does a shipload of tourists have on a port of call? Those were always my questions. I guess it comes from a background in studying history and also in the humanities generally.
Right.
So this came about in the course of that career.
Well, and not only as an executive, it's an economic indicator, to know what these tourists are doing when they come ashore.
Precisely. For the ports of call, this was vital because you could have passengers not come ashore because they say, well, I don't know, this is a scary place. Am I safe? And then they might go on a cruise director's tour, which is almost always quite superficial. And so I was trying to do something that would put the cruise passenger in the port in closer touch with the people who live there and how they live and what their issues are. And it was, you could call it an insurgency in the cruise industry, but it worked very successfully.
But what an involved process then, because I would think that it would be a much more rewarding trip to involve the tourists with much more of the community.
It was. We used to go to, we had one ship that operated to 3 ports in Jamaica, and we would arrange monthly, the cruises were weekly, but monthly we could take part in a rehearsal of the Jamaica folk singers. And other times we could meet up with scholars from Jamaica who were very accessible. And they had ways of communicating their issues that were very reachable. When they said things, people said, aha, oh, okay, I understand. Well, I never knew that. And that, for me, that was the reward, oh, I never knew that.
And what a great thing for people to take away as a tourist, as a visitor, to have that complete involvement. Now, your involvement in bicycling and the trails throughout Florida is the stuff of legends. Your name is spoken throughout Florida as a person who really awoken the communities around here to what trails are throughout the state of Florida. And one day, perhaps you can tell us, do you know how many miles you've done on some of these trails?
I estimate that I've cycled 30,000 miles
That's
in Florida
fantastic.
On trails where we have them, and otherwise on back roads for the most part. Every once in a while, I find myself on a busy road. I found that once coming out of Tampa International Airport, going over to Pinellas, and I couldn't get off the interstate, and was no way to do it, so I just gritted it out.
That's a pretty difficult spot to have you. But at the same time, you've probably seen on some of these trails some of the most pristine and beautiful land throughout the state.
It's a great value to Florida for people to have access to these natural resources. Hikers always do. Hikers always do, but there are a lot more people who ride bicycles than hike. And for cyclists to feel safe, number one, he or she needs typically to have paved surface under their wheels. Though if you have a mountain bike, okay, but you're not going to travel long distances on a mountain bike on dirt. So trails are vital, and the trick is to make them as unobtrusive as possible and to collect the fewest possible numbers of support services.
Right, that would be
just
required.
Carry your water, do what you have to do, carry a spare tube and some tire irons, helpful. And otherwise, if you have a trailhead every 10, 20 miles, you're doing fine.
Well, it's a remarkable achievement, and I think your background and expertise in that has kind of led you to be the forerunner of beginning the first Sustainable and Authentic Florida Conference, which is going to be held right here in Manatee County.
Yes.
And can you give us a little kind of a genesis of how this idea came to be and sort of what is the importance of having that type of conference? What is a sustainable and authentic Florida?
Okay.
Maybe that's the first question.
Maybe I can tell it a little bit anecdotally. Though preceding that, I would say that sustainable and authentic can be defined many ways. For me, it's engaging in an economy that seeks to protect non-renewable resources. If you keep spoiling your water, if you have too much saltwater intrusion, if you're drawing down the aquifer steadily, not healthy for a long-term economy, even a mid-term economy. And sometimes we talk about this and people say, oh, long-term, well, that won't happen for 50 years. No, because if you think of a 50-year cycle, we are well into it.
Absolutely.
So it's not 50 years from now. It may be, for all I know, scientists can tell us more, it may be 8 years or 6 or 10.
Exactly.
I don't know. But we're getting to the edge. We know that because we're taking down these resources. I just heard that even through all of this rain we had from Hurricane Isaac, that the aquifer is still diminishing.
That's correct.
So this is pretty serious. So for me, sustainable means protecting non-renewable resources, and authentic means using those resources in a way to organize your economy. It's not to say, oh my gosh, if we can't use up our clean air and use up our clean water, woe is us, our economy will die, and the answer to that is absolutely not. We have a certain propensity to be afraid of change, but once we go down that road, there will always be light at the end of that tunnel, because that's what keeps us creative, keeps us thinking and fresh. Is, okay, we have a challenge, and now let's supply an answer. That's what everything is about in economy. If you ask people to take risk, if that's what capitalism is about.
Growth, anything of that is the same philosophy.
Yep. So you need to, if you have a challenge, that's the trigger to provide an answer. And if you don't get those challenges, you just get lazy in your thinking, in your marketing,
it's
in
more
your
of the
development. Same. Yeah, that's what's dangerous. New challenges is what creates success.
So as you saw these challenges and you're seeing them developed and having your, as I mentioned before, your expertise, it came to you to say, we need to pull together a variety of people and open up for a discussion of how we can have this sustainable and an authentic Florida, and how do we meet those challenges? And is that kind of how the genesis of this conference came to be?
Specifically, it came to be when I was riding my bicycle. I was staying in North Longboat Key with a friend, Rusty Chinnis, for a few days, and I had my bicycle, and I came riding up on Anna Maria Island, heading north to Tampa Bay. And this was very ordinary for me to get on my bicycle and explore. But what struck me was the fact that despite Anna Maria Island's success in tourism, you couldn't tell. It looked like a real place. It didn't have people in hula hoops and mouse ears and carrying on in that touristic way. And the reason I pondered was that's because Anna Maria Island is its own place. The people who live here or there are committed to the way they want to live. And if you want to vacation there, well, come on. But we're not going to do anything for you other than what we do for ourselves. And most interestingly, most of the lodgings are places where people used to live.
That's true.
So the shape, the standard, the outlook that fosters tourism in Anna Maria Island and generally through coastal Manatee County is rare and I dare say as perfect as tourism is likely to get any place.
Well, coming from you, what a great compliment that is to the people in Anna Maria. One of the things that I've noticed, and I'm sure that you're aware of this, is Anna Maria has a very rich history. Going back, to the early 1900s, when it was just small and grew, but they're very, very proud of that history. The Pine Avenue historic features that they try to instill in everyone. But as you saw this, and you saw this beautiful, pristine little environment, that you thought, well, this kind of it personifies what an authentic Florida should be. And so that from that idea grew this idea to bring people together to say, listen, how can we get these ideas and concepts to a wider audience? And
what we did, Charles, as I was, when this came to me while I was cycling, I asked myself, well, where else in Florida is like this? And I began to think, and I thought quickly of a number, but three stayed in my mind. It's funny, I'm going to mention one of them is Mama Beach. And people will say, Mama Beach, sustainable or authentic? You have to be kidding. They're flamboyant, they waste resources. But that's only because people don't know. When Disney opened in '73, I think it was, Disney captured the family trade from Mama Beach. Mama Beach didn't know what to do with itself. The big hoteliers said, well, casino gambling. The voters turned that down. And just at that time, an art historian shows up from Connecticut, Miami Beach, and she says apocryphally, oh, you have Art Deco hotels here. And nobody knew what Barbara Capitman was talking about. But the long and short of it, it's architecture that turned that city around.
That's true.
It was under severe handicaps. Criminal refugees that had been released at the port of Mariel in Cuba came up and they marauded the residents of Miami Beach. They left. Real estate became very affordable. Mrs. Capitman says Art Deco hotels And of course, it's the kind of thing that young people love. So young people, young adults, flocked to the beach to become part of this. They found affordable housing, and they turned the trick. And she did it without, any great capital resource other than the resource of young minds and hands and a willingness. And Miami Beach has never looked back from that. Everything changed. It's one of the greenest cities in Florida today, I can tell you, because I'm there from time to time. And you try to drive a car there, you'll go nuts. They have made it almost impossible to drive a car. So everybody rides bikes. They have a Deco bike rental system. They have terrific bus system. And you walk. It's not that big a place. So, and most of the places where the tourists are someplace near the beach anyway. So it works. The other two places are DeLand, which is where I'm from. DeLand has this very interesting interaction with Stetson University, wherein they are partnered to strengthen downtown, to keep downtown safe from encroachment by Daytona Beach on the one hand and Orlando on the other, because we're pretty close, an hour from Orlando, half hour from Daytona Beach. So they're working at that. They're working together on issues of how to keep downtown intact when Sunrail comes. The station for DeLand is 3 miles west of town. So there's bound to be some transit-oriented development, and that's going to do nothing for downtown. So the question is, how do you balance out the sensibility, the sense of having new people who come live close to the transit, but how do you keep downtown together? So it's the outlook that makes them...
Perfect word.
Yeah, it's the outlook that makes DeLand really notable. And the third, other than Coastal Manatee, is Wakulla and Franklin counties up in the near Panhandle. Wakulla on the north side is a bedroom community of Tallahassee. And on the south side, the coast is 83% in public ownership.
Remarkable.
And lots of people have come there who want to live in that kind of a green environment. And so they have decided they need to organize an economy around that environmental protection that's vital to the region. As part of their advocacy, this year, the legislature and the governor gave them $4.5 million to set up the first environmental institute in Florida. And it's very focused on ecotourism. Their influence will range from the Big Bend
all the way,
pretty far up toward Panama City, not quite there. And so what's happening now, because of this initiative, you are getting everybody who wants to be in such an economy starting to think now about coming to Wakulla County, which means they will come thinking, how do I have the least impact on this environment in which I want to engage? So you see that you have this result when you say we're going green, then people say, oh, well, we're going to come there and do this, and other people invest in it, and so on. So the economy doesn't stop. It doesn't go backward. It goes forward.
And it's a sustainable type of growth as well. I mean, the examples that you gave are pretty diverse. I mean, they're very diverse. And I think, people attending a conference and hearing from these participants that are going to be here can see in that diversity where their community might be able to fit.
Charles, absolutely. That's the value of attending the conference, because we have a number of speakers. We have 7 different speakers.
Well, tell us some of the speakers. And before we start, you're working with a very talented woman, Carolyn McKeon, who is helping with a lot of the outreach of this community. And she and you have put together a great series of speakers who are going to be talking about some of the things that you've just mentioned. Can you tell us a little bit about who those people are going to be?
Yes, I would only add about Caroline. She's the engine of this thing with Florida Journeys Communications. She just knows what she's doing, and she's here from Sarasota, and I'm not, so she knows what to do. Some of the speakers, I'm trying to think of those who might be known in Manatee County in particular. One might be Gary Mormino, who founded the Florida Studies program at the University of South Florida. It's the only program of its kind in the state. He's a social historian. He holds a named chair at the university. He's a scholar, he's a friend, and he's very informal. People will love Gary. But he can speak very fluently about the social history of Florida and where this kind of movement fits. Another one is John Moran, a photojournalist. He's legendary. He is above all, I would say, a humanitarian. John does his work. He has a day job where he works for taking pictures, but essentially he is driven by the beauty, the nature of Florida. He has a long view of Florida history, and he understands what we must protect and how to see it in its glory, and that's what he photographs. Others who are speaking, I don't think many people here would know of Peggy Bulger, but Peggy is the retired director of the American Folklife program at the Library of Congress.
Which to have someone of her caliber, all these people have great backgrounds, but to have someone of her caliber from the Library of Congress come down and talk about from a historical perspective is just a wonderful opportunity.
Peggy today is traveling, or maybe it was yesterday, I think she's traveling from her home in Amelia Island to China under the American Humanities program. She had just come down from working in Newfoundland. She's a very well-traveled person. And Clay Henderson is known to many people, probably not only an environmentalist and a very successful land use attorney, but he is a public servant. You could call him an unelected public servant, because all his thinking about environment has to do with protecting it and building those protections into the Florida Constitution, into Florida legislation, generally into Florida advocacy. Clay was the president of Florida Audubon Society. He was a member of the Volusia County Council when he was in his mid-20s, and very soon wound up as the chairman of the council. He's very versed, he's very knowledgeable, and he is a terrific storyteller.
Well, the caliber of people that are coming together for this conference, including yourself, lend a kind of an emphasis to focus on issues, but also to see the wider picture and to say how one can become involved, engaged, and to call for advocacy, perhaps. Those are the type of things. But who do you see attending this? Recently, you had a press conference with the Manatee Chamber of Commerce, and you had several significant people there from this community who are really looking forward to participating. Ed Childs, David Teitelbaum, both great people in the Anna Maria community. But who do you see throughout the state and throughout this area as being part of your attendees?
I want developers, real estate people, because I don't have to convert them at the conference. I just want them to become familiar with other ways of doing things. You can develop, but you can also develop with a large amount of conservation land, and to realize that if you do this, that you will attract a buyer, a dweller, who in our time is not going to be happy simply living in rows of houses in a gated community or that kind of thing. People want to know, in our lives, we're beginning to ask, when I'm here, where am I? What is this place? What's going on? What are the issues? And where some people are utterly focused inside the gates of their gated subdivisions, more and more people don't want to be inside the gate. They want to be outside and active in the real community. And so
part of their environment.
And they are moving downtown in large, large numbers.
Well, you know, that's a very good point that you brought up, because it is a national type of way of thinking, is that people don't want the gated communities, and they don't want to be getting in their car and have to drive to the store. They want a place where they can come out or go to a bookstore or go to a restaurant. And that's a whole type of thinking. And I think business and developers are seeing that. So you're not saying, we want you to do business. We want you to think of a new way of doing business.
And sustain your own enterprise by doing this. We know that this is, probably more people want to go into gated communities than don't. But if you look at the trend, if you evaluate the process, then you can see if you want to be on the cutting edge, if you want your children and grandchildren to inherit this business, they will probably not be building gated subdivisions. They're probably going to be building different types of urban structures that let people walk out the door and say, wow, there are these people walking around, there are people at sidewalk cafes, the interactions are very close, the degree of separation among people is not like in the suburbs. The interactivity is a very dynamic sort. And people want this in part because government can no longer subsidize the far suburbs.
They can't.
They're very costly. So we're having the same thing in DeLand right now. The first new sizable dwelling in downtown DeLand is being negotiated right now. It will have about 85 units. We haven't seen anything like that in DeLand, but those people are going to be able to walk out and walk down Woodland Boulevard, like David Teitelbaum is doing over at the Tortuga Inn. When people vacation there, they can walk up and down Bradenton Beach or ride that free bus.
The trolley, which is...
It's brilliant because it's comfortable, it's air-conditioned, and it's frequent, and it's free.
What more could you ask for?
So you can get from Bradenton Beach up to Pine Avenue, and, Pine Avenue has become one of the experimental green streets of Florida, half-mile long, no more than that. But the use of the shunning of grass that takes pesticides and such things is being replaced by sand.
Shell.
And sand and shell, yes, thank you. And board walkways, so you don't have to step on the shell if you're barefoot, as so many people are. And it's utterly casual, but that casual aspect is not just something that you dream up, it's the result of how you work with materials that facilitate
and that have a connection with the environment.
Yes, sir.
Too. I mean, it kind of enhances, it augments the environment that you're in. Now, in your conference in the 3-day from October 17th through the 19th, and if people want to find out more, we'll have the website information up on the screen so they can find out some more information. But you've packed in to those 3 days a kind of an extensive lecture series, tours, interactions with things throughout the conference. So tell us kind of how it's going to be broken down, if you may.
The 4 places that we've chosen to represent, and there are ever so many other places we could have represented. There are many aspects that we're talking about that prevail in Sarasota, for example, but once I knew we were going to do this in Anna Maria Island, there was no point in using Sarasota in this year because we hope this will become a program that sustains itself from year to year in different places.
Throughout the state?
Featuring different examples of where this work is being done. But we will have a speaker, and then we will have a place. And the places are represented by teams of 4. They're not official spokespersons for where they come from, and that was very important because we don't want anybody standing up saying, oh, you know, thus and such. We have everything, you know, everything for everybody. That's useless. It's of no value whatsoever if you're trying to help people learn. So we have people, 4 from each place, who talk about their own advocacy to create more sustainable and authentic communities. And I found one person to lead each of the 4 teams, and they have picked the other 3 people. And so we will have a speaker, a place, a speaker, a place, with some variation, because we have 4 places and 7 speakers. That's a big challenge. So we're facing up to that boldly.
But what a remarkable thing, and it's kind of diverse as well. You know,
Yes,
we're talking Cortez Village, which is very authentic, and you're talking about, what are some of the other places that you're going to be looking at?
While we're here, we're going to go by boat to Cortez Village. This is Caroline's very good thinking and good arranging. We're going to go from Anna Maria Island over to Cortez by 2 boats, and then we will go from Cortez to downtown Bradenton, downtown waterfront Bradenton. What we're focusing on altogether is coastal Manatee County, where this outlook prevails. I was just walking on Old Main Street this morning. That's what you get when you look for authenticity. The mom and pop shops or businesses may be utterly contemporary, but they're housed in traditional architecture.
Exactly.
So there's a certain excitement. So we'll be downtown Bradenton one evening for dinner. We will be in Cortez. We will be all up and down Anna Maria Island during the course of our stay. And we will be hearing also from people like Charlie Hunziker talking about preservation lands.
Natural resources.
Yeah, and the natural resource. Ed Childs will speak about the really brilliant work that he and others have been doing on Pine Avenue.
Exactly.
David will talk about restoration architecture.
Perfect.
And I'm not sure who else Caroline has on the program.
But it's pretty extensive. Now, if people are interested, Herb, in still signing up for this, they can do so?
Yes.
They can still participate in some or all of the conference?
Yeah, and I might mention, Charles, you referred to 3 days. It branches across 3 days, but it starts with lunch on Wednesday, and it ends before lunch on Friday. So it's 2 days. It's actually 2 full days.
2 full days, though.
Yeah, so we encourage people to register still, by all means. We want people to register for the entire conference because it builds. You can come in for any one speaker, but you will lose out on the interaction.
On that continuum of information.
On the continuum. That's the word.
And I think that's very important. You know, Manatee County is very, very fortunate that you selected this area to highlight this first Sustainable and Authentic Florida Conference. It's very fortunate. There's a lot of wonderful things that are happening throughout the county, both downtown and on the islands. And I think there's a lot of good examples and a lot of people who have the acumen to try to instill a little bit of excitement, perhaps in other people throughout the state. But as people get involved in this, what do you want them to take away? What is that when they leave on that Friday and they go back to their business and governments throughout the state? What is those key elements that you want them to take away?
Don't be afraid of climate change. That's a critical message. Don't be afraid of the state of the economy. Critical. How do you rectify the economy we're in part you do it by addressing climate change. Because once you take the blinders off, oh, I mustn't talk about that, we have to avoid that, we don't know what that's about. Well, if you don't know what it's about, find out, because that's how you learn how to create new enterprise. So I want people to come away from the conference not afraid of going forward with one of the bigger challenges we've had. I mean, it's like the Second World War, for example. You know, there were a lot of people who said, no, FDR, don't get involved in this. It's not our business. It's going to upset our way of life. But the consensus, if indeed it was a consensus, was we had to deal with it. We were being bombed in Pearl Harbor. Our ships were being sunk in the Atlantic. And at a certain point, you have to do something about it. And you have to get out of your comfort zone.
Correct.
And that's where we are. This is a huge challenge to how we live. Huge challenge, lead me to it. That's where I want to be.
Well, if anyone can meet those challenges, it's certainly you. And again, you know, Manatee County is very fortunate, you know, to have a gentleman of your caliber and expertise and guidance to host this conference. As you listed all these other people who will be attending, I'm sure most people will be attending because of your presence. And that's certainly a great indicator that this should be an ongoing annual conference at some of the places throughout the state. So, Mr. Hiller, I just want to take an opportunity to again thank you for not only choosing Manatee County, but for participating today and giving us kind of an insight into what the Sustainable and Authentic Florida Conference is going to be. And I would encourage anyone who's watching to kind of participate. Go to the website and see how you or your organization can participate in this very vital conference. Herb, I'm going to give you the last word.
Charles,
Sustainable and Authentic Florida. What's the key thing?
The key thing that hasn't been mentioned so far is how Manatee County has grasped the value of what you just described. There's been great support from county administration. It's terrific. And in particular, I have to cite Elliot Falcioni, who heads tourism in Manatee County, who grasped this at the beginning. And certainly Caroline from Sarasota, Ed David, a number of others as well. The support, please, it couldn't possibly happen without the support. I bring an idea, other people build on the dream.
Well, Elliot and Charlie Hunsaker are great, you know, advocates for Manatee County, and I think with your leadership and stewardship, this is going to be not only a very successful conference, but one that can be the harbinger of other things to come. And Herb, I want to thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you for joining us on this special edition of Up Close on METV.